Hi everyone, welcome to this Support Tools short webinar. Today we're looking at a social link canvas example and we look at a social enterprise cafe as a bit of a generic example for a social enterprise model that a lot of people and community organizations often try and make work. So these Support Tools webinars are primarily focused on people supporting social enterprises, so people working with social enterprises to help them be more successful. But this is useful for a social entrepreneur wanting to use the canvas for their own social enterprise as well. So let's get into it. So the goal today is one of deepening our understanding of the social link canvas. So running through an example of the canvas so that we can get a better understanding of how it works. And quite often when we teach the canvas to people over time, what they really want is to see examples, because that's often the best way to learn. The theory is all well and good of how you should do it, but actually seeing examples put into the canvas is where the learning often happens. So that's what we're going to do today. But firstly, a little background on what the canvas is for, what we're trying to achieve by filling in the canvas or supporting a social enterprise to fill in the canvas. So three things to note here. Firstly, taking a solid social enterprise idea and sketching it as a complete business model. And so that's going from idea, which is, I reckon we should do this, to a business model, which is, I think all of these things will come together to make this thing successful. So it's not just a product or a service or a problem that you want to solve. It's actually a complete business model that has all the fundamental components that will need to work in order for it to be successful. Secondly, once you've done this, it helps you decide whether your idea is actually worth pursuing, because often ideas look great when they're just in their first form of like, I reckon we should do this. But then once you've actually sketched it on the canvas and seen all the moving parts, you can actually start to be serious about deciding whether or not it's worth putting energy into this, because you can actually see how it works or will not work for that matter. Thirdly, it gets you to a stepping off point to put together a strategy for validating the business model in the real world with real customers. So that is, once you've finished the canvas, you've looked through it and you've figured that it's worth actually pursuing, it gives you that foundation to say, well, what of these assumptions in the canvas do we need to go and test? How are we going to go out and test, validate those things in the real world with real customers so we can get to success without wasting our time and money? Okay, with that said, let's jump into the example. So we're going to use a social enterprise cafe example. And like I say, this is, we see a lot of social enterprises that are starting around this idea of a cafe, or a lot of people wanting to start a cafe social enterprise. And one of the useful things for us to do with this cafe example is understand really how is our social enterprise going to deliver impact, and how is it different based on the choices we have for how it's going to deliver impact. Is it going to be a social enterprise that's focused on employment and training and having people in a work environment that wouldn't necessarily have access or would have barriers to that work environment? Is that going to be the focus? Is it going to be a product or service way of delivering impact? Is our social enterprise cafe going to promote healthy food? Is it going to be in an area of food poverty, offering discounted healthy organic food? Or is it in some way going to deliver outcomes via the product or service? And then finally, is it going to be an income generating social enterprise? Is its goal to be as profitable as possible so that that profit can then be channeled into other activities? And so whether there are other organizations that are going to use that money to deliver impact, or whether the organization that's running the cafe will use that money. But either way, is it focusing on making money? And what we often see is people trying to do all of these things or a couple of these things. And what we recommend is that you really focus in on one, because it's hard enough making a cafe succeed with no social enterprise component. And so figuring out what it is you're going to do and doing it really well is important. So with this example, what we're going to do is focus in on employment and training as being the way that this social enterprise cafe is going to deliver impact. So hopefully as we walk through the example of the canvas, you'll be able to see how it might be different if we picked one of those other ways of delivering impact. Okay, well let's jump into it. So this is a Google drawing template. So it's just in Google Docs, and we can use this to fill out the canvas as if it was on paper, which is useful if you want to share it with others and collaborate online. You can find a link to this in the sociallinkcanvas.com website if you want to use this digital version. But so just remembering the sort of way through the canvas, if you've done some of the other webinars or done some other work on the canvas, we start with purpose. Why are we doing this? We look at impact, which is what's the logic that explains how we are impacting the world positively. And then the sort of economic engine, who are the different customers that we have to serve, what problems do they have that we can solve, what value can we create for them by solving those problems, what's our actual solution, what's our thing that we're doing, our product or service, what's our channels, how are we going to reach them at the scale we need to, revenue or financial sustainability, how are we going to, how's money going to come in as a result of what we do, costs, what money has to go out, key metrics, what numbers do we have to watch to make sure the business model's working and will work in the future, and unfair advantage, what have we got as an advantage that's going to make sure that we succeed. And that's important because it's really hard. Ask anyone who's in the cafe business. It's really hard to make a cafe be successful, and that's regardless of having all the extra cost that you might have as a social enterprise. So let's get into it. And this is a fictitious example that I just put together, but it probably reflects quite a few social enterprise cafes that you'll find. So purpose, if we look at, oh, that was a mistake. Here we go. So purpose, to support vulnerable young people in our community to overcome obstacles and to thrive. So our goal is that we feel like there's a need in the community for something to help young people overcome obstacles and thrive. The impact model that we're sketching for this social enterprise. So this is a really simple version of an impact model. You can make these as complex as you like, but this we find useful as a bare bones. So the problem that we're solving, young people in the community struggling at school and missing out on a positive future. The activity, so what are we doing? What's going to happen as a result of what we're doing? So young people, a young person has barista training and employment in a cafe and wraparound support services from mentors. The outputs, what happens as a result of this? So the young person completes a training course, the young person works as a barista for 6 months, and then the outcomes. What are the positive things that happen short and medium term as a result? So they gain barista skills, they gain job skills, they gain confidence in the workplace, they gain ongoing employment outside of the program. So those are the outcomes that we're going to try and create and measure, and they're going to lead to our long-term impact. So what's the thing that's going to happen long-term that we're aiming for, sort of 10 years out? And so flourishing youth, happier, healthier communities, that's what's going to result from all of those outcomes being created over time. So that's our impact model. And then we jump into the business model component of customers and money and how that whole thing works. And like I said, we start with customer segments. So our consuming customer, very high level, we can call them trendy local shoppers and cafe goers. We'll want to zero in a little more because cafes have different focuses depending on what kind of customers they're trying to attract. So as we develop this, we would focus in more on the kinds of customers that we actually want and not just expect everybody. The other customer type that we've got to contend with, or we've got to move to make our business model work, is a government work training funder. So a government agency that's going to fund us to provide work training and employment for people. That's going to be the other part of our income. Our early adopters on the customer side, the consumer side, socially conscious local shoppers. So who are those people that will be primed to come to our social enterprise cafe based on the fact that they really care about the outcomes that we're hoping to get. And then over time, we want to get to a broader customer segment, which is this trendy local shoppers group, which is going to be bigger than the socially conscious ones. Okay, so customer segments, what problems do these customers have that we can solve for them? And just bearing in mind, these aren't the social problems. These are the problems that the individual customer has that we can solve for them. So from the consumer side, feeling of guilt at frivolously spending money on coffee. So the idea is that these trendy cafe goers, they really love going to cafes, they really enjoy that experience, but there's a pang of guilt for them that they know they're to some extent wasting that money, and they know that there's people much less fortunate than them. From the government side, the problem is it's really hard to support youth once they've already been in trouble. And so that's just a guess at a problem that government training funder has, which is how to actually create a positive outcome for at-risk youth, or for youth that have actually been in trouble. And our assumption is that there's someone in that organization who's responsible for this who really struggles to make that work. And therefore, that's a problem we can hone in on. The existing alternatives on the consumer side, regular cafes validate that there's people wanting to go to cafes, and fair trade coffee validates that there's a coffee consuming, potentially cafe going customer segment that actually care about the environment, about society and sustainability and all of those things, social issues. Okay, and then across to unique value proposition. So this is the value that we're going to create for them, really the benefit that customer is going to get. And that's really the inverse of the problem. So if the problem for the customer is that feeling of guilt at frivolously spending money on coffee, the value that they're going to get is great coffee that supports your community. So you can feel really good about going shopping and buying that coffee and enjoying your time in that cafe because you're supporting the community at the same time. And the benefit, the value that we're going to create for the government training provider is measurable outcomes for at-risk youth. So what we're going to provide is that data that shows that we're having a measurable positive benefit. And that will allow them to achieve their KPIs or their key performance indicators, their measures of success, so that they can go and do their job well. Then we jump across to solution. So this is the actual thing. The idea normally starts with the solution. So a cafe that provides training and employment for at-risk youth. That's the thing that we're doing. That's what all of the rest of the business model kind of hangs off. Then across to channels, how are we going to attract our customers? Prime foot traffic, shop front location in a council-owned building. And so this is the idea that we're going to get a council location in a really good area of foot traffic. So we're going to have that as our prime channel for customers. We may over time do some advertising, we may do events, we may sort of figure out other ways, other channels for reaching customers, but our fundamental one will be that foot traffic, that people will walk past us, see us, and want to come in. Revenue or financial sustainability. We've got the revenue for sale of coffee and food, and so that's our basic revenue from the cafe model, sell coffee and food. But we've also got revenue that comes from payments for each trainee from the government work training funder. So that's the government agency who's funding each trainee in the program based on certain outcome measures, and so we'll get a funding stream from that, and that's how we fund all the extra costs. So costs, we've got our fundamental cafe costs, supplies, equipment, rent, staff, all of that kind of stuff, and then we've got the cost of the wraparound support for the youth that are going to be being trained, and so that's mentors and monitoring and assessment and all of that kind of stuff. So what that just calls out is that we're going to have a bunch of extra cost in our business model, and the reason for this pink post-it note here for the income from the government training provider is that we need this in order to make the business model work. The cafe business is really hard, and most cafes fail even when they don't have all of this extra cost associated with actually supporting the youth. There's going to be more paid staff in order to support them than you would have with a regular cafe, and probably just other risks that occur as a result. And so we need that extra revenue coming in from the training provider to offset those costs. And then key metrics. So these are going to be the numbers that we watch to make sure our business model is working. So sales growth, something along those lines, returning customer numbers. So it's not just going to be the sales that we have, it's going to be the growth in sales or the growth in the number of returning customers that show that actually people want to come back and have coffee here again and again. It's all well and good if people come once because they want to try it out, but if they don't come back, then there's not a fresh supply of new customers every day for them to all come once. So one of those numbers we'll be watching is that kind of growth in sales over time and that returning customer, recurring revenue we call, customer coming back again and again, because obviously we want people to fall in love with our cafe and come back again and again so they become profitable customers for us. And then other metrics will be probably around impact. So what are the impact metrics that we're going to be watching that shows that it works? And that'll be down to a more nuanced understanding of the impact model and also an understanding over time of what we're testing in the impact model to show that it works. And that will be reflected in some of those impact metrics that we're going to watch to make sure that the impact model is working. And then finally, last but definitely not least, the unfair advantage. What is it that is going to give our cafe the opportunity to succeed in a really cutthroat and difficult marketplace? And so what we've got there is heavily discounted rent on a premium location from the local council. So that's a stab at what might be an unfair advantage for this cafe. So for example, if the council gave us rent at a third of the normal cost for a premium location, that might be good enough to help us kind of get a leg up and succeed ahead of other cafes, because even though we're a social enterprise and competition might feel a bit yucky, we are in competition with the other cafes. We need to be clear about that, and we need to figure out what our advantage is. Another way of understanding the advantage, maybe we would put our effort into promoting and branding the cafe based on the social mission, and we might think that the social mission is somehow going to be our unfair advantage because people are going to want to come to our cafe over other cafes. And so that also could be an unfair advantage, but we'd need to prove that. We'd need to prove that we are actually attracting those customers based on the social mission. So there you have it, a social lean canvas for a social enterprise cafe. And as I mentioned before, this canvas would look very different if we had a different way of delivering impact. If our impact was going to be around providing good, healthy, nutritious meals to people that couldn't afford them, if that was going to be our impact model would look very different, and our business model would look very different as well. Our customer segments wouldn't necessarily be trendy local shoppers that have lots of money. They're going to be people in the local community that need nutrition but don't have the money to pay for it. The way the revenue works will be different. We're not selling premium coffee to high-paying customers. We'll be looking for a source of revenue somewhere else, or maybe we'll be looking to lower costs. Maybe we'll be looking to get free or discounted supplies of food so that we can sell that food at a discounted price. And so you could see the whole model would be fundamentally different if we tried to gear ourselves around a different impact model. Likewise, if it was all about economics and it was just a matter of earning as much money as we could to pay for impact somewhere else or in another part of our organization, again, the canvas would look different. It would be all optimized around making as much money as possible, not spending our time training and supporting young people to overcome obstacles. So hopefully that makes sense and gives you a bit of a sense of how the Canvas fits together. There's some resources to follow up on if you haven't had a look already. Whareaki.org is Ākina's resource website. So you can go there and you can look at the webinars on the Introduction to the Social Link Canvas for more understanding of how it works. Introduction to Starting a Social Enterprise for practical examples of using the Canvas. And the other support tools videos are really useful as well, including at the bottom there the other example canvases. So at least have a look at the different example canvases that are there, and it'll slowly help you understand kind of some of the nuances of how to fill it out, and that'll put you in a better position to support other people to fill out the canvas, or indeed to fill it out yourself. And finally, as mentioned before, the sociallinkcanvas.com website. It's got a bunch more other instructional material and also a link to the Google Doc to fill out the canvas yourself online, should you want to.